Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Outside the Box video. Thought I would go ahead and dust off this series to focus on a review of the latest phenomenon. In this case, a film that came out on Netflix a couple of weeks back, and everyone has seen it, and then finally I had a chance to go ahead and see it, and I thought I would showcase a review of it here. In this case, of course, I'm talking about The Bird Box, which is a film that started off with a huge bang and is still going strong to this very day. It's a film that instantly spawned a bunch of memes, a lot of articles with it as well. Not just with what occurred within the film, but also a lot of talk about certain subjects, like about the monsters themselves, the people's actions, the endings, how it compared to the book, because it is based on a book as well. All this stuff is just so fascinating. So I thought to myself, I saw at least a synopsis of it. It got me interested, and so I finally checked it out. And so now that I've seen it, I wanted to go ahead and share my review of it here. I'll discuss some of the pros associated with it too, and then also some of the cons, see if you agree with some of that too. And then also I would love to hear what your thoughts are of the film as well. So let's go ahead and let's talk about in this case my review of The Bird Box. By the way, this will be obviously filled with spoilers, so if there's a small amount of you out there that haven't seen the film, I would recommend go ahead and see it first and then check out my video. But if you don't mind the spoilers, then I'll post them here. Plus, I'll post pictures of apparently what the monsters were supposed to look like, at least based on certain factions. Some of these pictures have been taken down already, apparently on Instagram, so it's interesting to see how real these things were. But yes, The Bird Box. Finally saw it this past weekend, and I must say it's a pretty good film. Not great, like it's not the best film of all time, but at the same time, it's not a bad film as well. It's definitely something that I can see why there's a lot of talk about it because there's so many interesting angles to discuss. But yes, as far as the pros, here's what I thought. First off, the main reason I wanted to see it was because it instantly reminded me, when I was looking at the information of it, of Silent Hill. Those of you that follow my YouTube channel know how much I love Silent Hill. I love the game, I love the series, I love the franchise, I love the films, the comic books, everything associated with it. And if you're wondering, well, how does this tie into Silent Hill? Well, just look at the like from the outside in, just look at the main facts. In this case, you're dealing with a world in the world of Silent Hill that involves some things, in those cases, some being monsters or situations being created that specifically respond to each person individually. And there are suicides in the Silent Hill world as well. So sometimes you'll see them in the games where people, whatever they've done things so bad that it repeats itself on a continuous basis. That's its main form of torture, and it causes people to commit suicide, and then they have to somehow get revived, and then they go through it all over again. Such is the same here with the Bird Box. In this case, whatever this world is, whatever it was that was unleashed upon the real world, it created these monsters, and these monsters in turn create the situations that are each conform to each individual person. So I thought it was that the film did a really good job of showcasing how, with very brief snippets, like somebody stating about their mother, another person stating about a baby, how each one sees things individually separate. So I love how they were able to showcase that and without actually showing it, make you realize every person has a different experience. And that's how I immediately thought back again to Silent Hill. So really great way that I thought it tied in together with everything. And also in a way because of this. Obviously, in the film, they had to have the blindfolds on, they had to have the cars blacked out, anything they could to basically block themselves from seeing these creatures, whatever they were. Such is the case again with Silent Hill in the world of fog. That giant fog that just encompasses the entire town makes things so hard to view. I thought that was also like a great little tie-in. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but at least I saw some similarities. Another thing I really loved about the film was right at the beginning, as it was happening in real time, you saw the pandemonium. Like right there, you saw point zero when it came to the very first instance of this thing, whatever it was, attacking that town. I can't remember if the town was specifically named in the film. Somebody might have to point it out to me, but you can especially see as it occurred right there, and it happened quick. That's why I loved it because it was very realistic. If something like that were to truly occur, then it would take no less than maybe like an hour or so for stuff to just truly get out of hand, because there you saw somebody at the beginning in the hospital talking on the phone. Who knows what happened? Presumably, they in turn saw something on their phone, like either an image or they saw video or whatever it was, or maybe they're just staring out the window at the bad at a bad time. And when they did so, then this thing drove them insane, and they started to bang their head against the actual window. And then it was from there, literally with Bullock's character coming outside, that was it. Like it was on. It was everyone started to see these things, and then that's when pandemonium and the downfall of society truly occurred. It was horrific, but it was so beautiful to like see. The way it was presented was just perfect when it came to showing how realistic it was. It reminded me too of how it stayed with just one person. In this case, Sandra Bullock's character reminded me of War of the Worlds, the Steven Spielberg Tom Cruise film that came out in the mid 2000s. If you recall, in that film, everything stayed from the perspective of one person, in this case Cruise, and his family. Such was the case here with Sandra Bullock's, and then that made it much more personal. The idea that you're no longer seeing things from the military side, from the scientist side, from some kind of world government side. No, in this case, you're just seeing it from one person's single angle, and you get to see as much as they see, so to speak, when it comes to the information of whatever's happening around them. So very, very nice. I love the build up. I love how it did it all in real time. All that stuff was great. Also, another great positive thing about the Bird Box is the challenge that the film had. In this case, it was how do you live in the world? How do you fight in a world, especially where you can't see what you're fighting against. Obviously, I'm talking about those monsters. There, whatever those things were, there's nothing you can do in terms of being able to see them, and that instantly creates a very hard challenge for everyone trying to survive in there. I loved how throughout those tiny moments within the film where you were stuck in that house with Bullock's character, you got to see people basically not arguing, but slowly you could see the tension building up. Some of them wanted to leave, some of them wanted to stay, some of them wanted to go on food runs, some people wanted to let others in, all that stuff. It's like trying to survive, trying to live, trying to just go on with your daily life as best as you can while these things are outside, and you can't do a single thing about it in terms of fighting back because you don't know exactly what's going to occur. All you have is just the evidence of one single second of a glimpse being enough to cause people to just kill themselves. So obviously, when you have that interesting challenge, I thought they did a very nice presentation of it. As short as it was, they still did a really great way of showcasing it in the world too. That's why his character, Malkovich's character, to me remained the most interesting because he was truly stating the most common sense thing. Obviously, in a jerk kind of way, the way he was stating everything, but his character, looking back, pretty much was spot on with everything that was going on. Like he was immediately, whatever he stated turned out to be true afterwards. So I understand that his character was apparently created from scratch. Like there was somebody else within the book that was also based on his character, but it was heavily modified for the film, and that's why he came out as being, I guess, the most common sense one. And then, of course, the biggest one, the biggest pro is the monsters themselves and what little showed of them. In this case, how they remained beautifully mysterious. So, right from the beginning, you were wanting desperately to find out what it was that people were looking at. I mean, when you saw that lady, the sister of Sandra Bullock's, looking outwards towards some angle and clearly seeing whatever these things were, it instantly caused her to go insane and then try to crash the car. You, in turn, as a viewer, wanted to see what it was, but you couldn't see it because obviously the film was not going to show it thereafter. But showcasing the reactions of it and how mysterious these creatures were from it, it all played out so perfectly. Maybe seeing people's reactions, and not the monsters themselves, remain the best way to do so. Plus, it played on you in terms of in your mind, like wondering how can you see these things, like what angles can you go about, like for example the electronics. There was that guy who was in the I can't remember his name, but the actor, but he was in the Jurassic Park films. There he was trying out something logically, something that you and I would think of as well. In this case, why not use monitors? Why not use, in this case, cameras stationed outside the home, maybe if we can't see them directly, then maybe we can use these monitors to do so. And obviously, that didn't work. But it caused you to think about other things, like what if you could use photographs, take pictures? Would that work? Or what if you wanted to try mirrors? Would that work? Or even then, a loose variation of mirrors. What about doing reflections, like looking at an angle of something and then trying to see what these creatures are? Would that work as well? All these interesting angles. I loved how the film didn't explore them, but it made you wonder about it as well. And so keeping these monsters mysterious, it definitely worked. Not showing them, but I'll talk about that more in a minute. How that was a con at the same time too. And then the other big pro of the film is the river scenes. It started off obviously with the river scene and her with Bullock and her arresting monologue at the beginning, and then it would jump to the past and then go back to the river scenes in the present. I'm glad they kept those the shortest because those turned out to be the ones that dragged on the most. There's only so much you can do when it comes to rowing on a river and then continuously telling someone it's time for, what was it called, quiet time or something, where they put the blankets over themselves and then that way they could talk without seeing these creatures surrounding them. So that got short really quick. So I'm glad they kept that tiny amount as opposed to just continuing to drag it on. I don't know how much it was in the book, but at least in the film, it would not have played out well if they kept that particular scene just going onwards. Now let's go ahead and let's talk about the cons associated with these with the film. So let's go back to what I was talking about, the monsters. Yes, they remain mysterious. Yes, you did not see them. Yes, it worked out better that way. But there's only so much you can do without showing the monsters or without talking about the monsters more, that this quote unquote tension then gets boring after a while. I mean, how many times did they have scenes showcasing the wind blowing with some sinister sounds coming out, some, I guess, deep ominous voice, not voice, but like a blowing effect that would come out as well. After it happened for the umpteenth time, I thought to myself, this is getting a little bit less and less scary afterward. Eventually, you would have to get to the point where you have to start showing the monsters. Otherwise, that's it. Obviously, the monsters didn't come out, but it was great to see at least just that tiny, tiny little peek. In that case, being the drawings from that guy, that crazy guy that was let in afterward, whatever he was drawing and whatever his interpretations of the monsters were, those were the closest that we saw. But I love that little tiny peek. Why couldn't we have more of that? Why wasn't there something that could showcase more of the monsters in that manner? Maybe other people, how they could talk, and then if they've seen it, maybe some of the other crazies, if they'd seen it, how they would describe the monsters, and then that way they could showcase in some ways more of the monsters themselves. So there's again only so much you could do without it. I know Jaws is famous for that, how you can only see so much of the shark before it was finally revealed, but that's the key. Eventually, the shark was revealed. Here in this case, you have nothing. It reminded me also of Cloverfield, how there was those tiny brief spots of Clover being shown throughout the beginning of the film, towards the middle, and then finally had his big reveal. But again, eventually you saw him. Here in this case, the most you got to see in the real world of the film was a giant amount of leaves being blown in the background, and then that was it. That's not as much tension as you can get. Like that's not too good, in other words. But who knows? Maybe there might be something else that'll be shown if it's a deleted scene or something else that happens afterward with a special edition. Also, another big con that I thought was this. So there was suddenly a 5-year gap. In this case, not between the scenes of the river and the past, but in the past, there were the children that were born like as babies, and then boom, all of a sudden it was 5 years later, and they're young children. Like what happened in between? Especially since the film made it seem like it was so tense out there. You had all those crazy people driving around, going house to house almost. You had obviously those monsters trying left and right to get into houses. I mean, if they can walk cars, like the cars that the main cast were in as they were going to the grocery store. It's clear that they could move physical things. How long would it take for them to start moving windows open or start moving shades open, stuff like that? So in this case, all that 5 year gap, all of a sudden they're still safe. Like it made it. It seemed it was like two different contradictions. How can you have utter this pending doom, and then 5 years later they're still alive and they're still surviving? In that case, in the home. So it kind of like I was wondering like what happened within that gap. Did they go someplace else? Did they somehow do something outside to survive really really well to keep the people, the crazies away? Something along those lines. So I thought it should have explained more on that. And then the other big con that I had in the film, and this is talking on a more realistic stance. I mean, let's face it, in that world, the way everything was being portrayed, how quickly civilization went down, and how little there was in terms of a fight back, either from the people themselves or anything showcasing the military, even anything showcasing the government, nothing like that. It's pretty easy to surmise that in the end, truly, the monsters would have won, whatever these things were. They would have won along with those people that had mental issues that could survive in this, because it's so much easier to spend 5 minutes at a time visiting each home just to try to find if there's any survivors inside and force them to open their eyes, and finding there's nobody there and just moving on to the next home, as opposed to someone just trying to survive in a home. Because then you would have to find a home, find the right place, find it, and then try to survive in it, try to find food, an adequate shelter, all the works that you need in order to survive. That takes so much more effort than, let's say, somebody just visiting a home every 5 minutes, breaking windows, going inside, and then seeing nobody there, or in the worst case scenario, seeing people there and then just causing utter demise, but like utter havoc between the survivors there. So let's face it, in the real world, if this would have happened, then these monsters would have taken over. Like it would have been something like that. So I know it ended on a positive note, and I know it kind of made things seem less bleak. But at the same time, if we're talking about realistic stuff, I think there would have been a far more bleaker true ending as opposed to what was shown. But otherwise, I wanted to show this too. You'll see this nice little photo here. These are the ones, these are the things apparently as they were supposed to appear in the film. So everyone had their own different interpretation, but apparently one of the special effects gurus there on the film showcased this was going to be Bullock's version. So I don't know how she would have seen these monsters and survived. Who knows? But apparently it was a sequence that was involved and was actually filmed. But this is how they would have looked like to her. They would look like little baby demon-looking things, like grown men but with baby faces. And these things would have then had some kind of CGI next to them to portray them in a much larger stance than normal size, but still you're looking at it here. So this would have been that nice nightmarish version of Bullock's character. So I don't know. What do you guys think? Is this something to cause enough people to commit suicide? Who knows? But at the same time, this is at least how it would have looked like for her. One other thing too that I wanted to mention about the monsters that I liked as well. I liked how it played all different origins of these things too. So there was that guy, I can't remember his name, but he was the one that worked at the grocery store. How he was stating like could be something involving demons, deities. There was even talk about magic or terrorism, all these different angles. And again, it left it very mysterious in terms of figuring out where they came from. But if they're following this in terms of how you see here, it definitely looks like it would have been more along the lines of, I don't know, something demonic, considering how these things looked, and how they're portraying, how they're mimicking in this case her own worst nightmare, like in terms of a child or something along those lines. So but that's just my own opinion. So what do you guys think about the Bird Box? What is your review on it? Do you agree with some of my points? Do you have anything else you wanted to add as well? Please post those comments below. I'll go ahead and I'll give it probably about 4 or 5 out of 5 stars, because it had a really strong outing and it continued to stay strong. It's just for those tiny little cons that were within the film. But still, it was a good showing, and I'll try to watch it again sometime soon. Maybe if I could catch up on all these little Easter eggs that people are saying that are within the film as well. But I would love to see what your review is of the film too. So whatever you want to share, please post those comments below. So, all right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.